The question today will be, is that going to be cash or credit? Hey guys, Houdini Ty here, helping you escape your 9 to 5. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the difference between buying a property with cash versus credit. Now, let's go into it. I'm going to be talking about cash on cash return in this section. Let's talk about a house that cost $100,000. If you purchased a house for $100,000 and it brings in $1,500 a month in rent, there are going to be some expenses, utilities, taxes, insurance, vacancy management, maintenance, things like that. Let's say for this house, as an example, is $300. So that means remaining is $1,200. That's your cash flow right there, $1,200. But instead of buying the house with all cash and making $1,200 a month, let's look at it from a credit aspect. If in this situation, you put 20% down, that's $20,000, and you borrow the other $80,000, we're going to talk about the same rent. So the cash flow is $1,200, but now you have to factor in a mortgage. And in this example, I said the mortgage was $450. So that means your resulting cash flow, $750. Not bad. But it is lower, right? You see that. It is lower. It's lower by $450. So some people will have a problem with that. But what I want you guys to see is the calculation on it. So it's called cash on cash return. So in this case, you put 100% cash down and your return is going to be 14%. 14% is not bad as a return on your investment if you own the property. Now mind you, you do have to do some work. You do have to manage the property, or if you don't want to manage the property and you want to get a property manager, you might have to manage the manager. So there's some labor involved in the expense and running the property, but in return you get 14%. But now, let's take a look. Here you only have $20,000 invested, and you're making $750 a month. Any guesses on what this return is? 45%. You're getting a 45% return when you use leverage. So there's a lot of people out there who will talk about you should buy properties with cash. But you notice how when you use leverage, borrowed money, when you use leverage, your rate of return is so much higher. And now, if you had $100,000 in cash, and you had to choose, if you did this one, where you put 20% down, that means you can do it 5 times. If you do $750 times 5, that's $3,750 versus $1,200. You guys see the difference there? So by using leverage, even though you have to pay back interest, this $450 a month, you're still making so much more in terms of cash on cash return, which is what is important here. And if you do it 5 times, you even make more cash flow. So it's a win on both sides. Higher return, more cash flow. So now let's talk about the different things that you should worry about or think about when borrowing money. In this section, we're going to be talking about risk mitigation. Now, if a person is renting a property from you and they decide not to pay you the monthly rent, then you're going to have a little bit of a problem. And what we've seen in the past is that when somebody doesn't pay the rent, if you have a mortgage and you're unable to pay your mortgage, you may lose the house. So how do you protect against that? How do you create a little barrier of protection? Well, there's a couple of different things. First is first. It starts with screening your tenants. If you have a good screening process and you put the very best tenant in, then fantastic. That's step 1. And then step 2 would be collecting their first, last, and security. So you already have a buffer where if they're not paying, you can go after the last month's security and hold on to that so that when you're going through the legal process and it's taking time, at least you have some money already. Okay, so now, if you somehow screen the person and they did badly, and then you used up all their funds, the other thing is, in our situation here, the $450 is all you have to cover, really. Now, in our first example, the expenses were $300. You may still need to cover the $300 a month. The only difference between the two is the extra $450. So you're going to need to cover an additional $750 a month, worst case scenario. Now, if a person, or you as the buyer, bought the property using leverage, and maybe you had 100 grand, but you decided to only use 20 grand, that means you have $80,000 left over to pay the $750. How long can you pay $750 for with an additional $80,000? Probably a long, long time. So that's another way. So if we recap, screen your tenants really well. Collect first, last, and security. 2 securities if possible. That is allowed. And then 3, have reserves. Have reserves. If you're going to borrow money to do deals, don't just use every little bit to put the $20,000 down, but also have some reserves in case things happen and you have to cover $750 ongoing. Now, there will be people who will try to scare you into thinking that borrowing money is a bad thing. Or they may say, oh, just be careful, just be careful. Well, what does careful actually mean? So now I'm trying to break down step by step of what that actually means so that you're going into this like a business person. You're looking at the risk and you're mitigating those risks so that you're not in a bad situation, worst case scenario. You always got to think worst case scenario. Now, here's another worst case scenario on the other side. Let's say that you're on the camp of, I just want to buy properties with all cash. And that's fine. How long will it take you to save $100,000 to buy the property all cash? It may take you your whole entire life. Some people will save and save and save for their whole life and still never get to $100,000. So now, if it takes you your whole life to save up $100,000 to buy the property, that means you never actually become a real estate investor doing rentals. And to me, that's a very risky thing because assets like rental real estate is what makes you rich. That is what makes you rich. And if you never collect assets, you will find yourself in a situation where you may be working for the rest of your life because you don't have any other source of income, and especially passive income like rental real estate could be. Now, there is some management that needs to take place, but nowhere near the amount of time and effort that is put into a job. Whereas you may get 1 call a month, and it might take you 1 hour to deal with that. But that is so much less than the 160 hours that you would put in at a job per month. So that's the difference, right? There is risk with not doing a deal as well. And the risk is you're only going to have to depend on your job for income. And for some people, that just doesn't work well because they don't make enough. They're already paycheck to paycheck. Having assets is your way of getting out of that situation. So again, this is how you mitigate the risk. Here are the risks right here. So I would suggest you leverage money to buy real estate so that you can start collecting the rental income, the cash flow from the passive asset, the passive source. Instead of only focusing on having a job and saving and saving and saving until you make enough money to do a deal all cash. Now, there is one more thing that you want to take a look at when you're determining whether you're being risky in terms of leverage or you're being smart in terms of leverage. In this last section, I'm going to also show you how you stay safe by analyzing what's called your debt service coverage ratio. That is the most important number to the bank. This is what they care about. I'm going to break it up into two parts. Debt service and then the coverage ratio. So debt service simply means what is your monthly mortgage payment. And that's your $450. Now, it's actually annual, but it doesn't matter as long as you keep the numbers consistent. So your debt service is the $450 in this case, and they want to know what the coverage ratio is. So what's covering the debt service is your NOI. And we got the NOI from the last example where you had $1,500 coming in as gross rent, and then you had $300 leaving as expenses. So what's left over? Your net operating income. So you take your net operating income and you divide it by the debt service, and in our situation here, it is 2.67. 2.67 is incredibly high. It is so high. So in this case, we're very safe. A bank is only looking for a 1.2. A 1.2. A conservative bank is looking for a 1.25. So a 2.67, way over there. Way, way, way high. Now, let's do a different example. And let's say instead of 1,500 coming in, we only had 1,000 coming in. And if instead of 300 going out, we have 400. So we got 1,000 coming in and 400 going out. That means our NOI is $600. Our mortgage is still $450. Do you know what the debt service coverage ratio is there? 1.33. And banks will look at that and say, wow, you are still safe. The higher this number is, the better. What this number says, this 1.33, is it's telling me that the rent minus the expenses is going to be 33% over the mortgage. So that keeps me safe. So that is the final way to determine whether you're being safe with borrowed money or dangerous, right? We just want to mitigate all of the risk. There's risk in everything you do, including getting in your car. But what we do is we try to mitigate risk. In a car, we put seatbelts, we drive the speed limit, and we put our seatbelt on. Those are how we mitigate risk in a car, and how we mitigate risk when it comes to borrowed money, aka leverage, is, again, you screen the tenant. You collect first, last security, maybe 2 securities. You have cash reserves, and then you analyze the deal for debt service coverage ratio. There's a lot of other things you can do to keep yourself safe in all situations. Like instead of having a bank give you money, maybe you can take on an equity partner so that they only receive income if the deal makes income. So that's another way. So there's a lot of different ways that we can slice it and we can mitigate risk. But the thing is, don't avoid risk. Look at it, analyze it, take the risk after you've mitigated a lot of it. You could have a job and be laid off. Then what? No cash flow there either, right? So don't worry so much about everything. Just analyze it, mitigate as many risks as possible, do more deals, collect more assets. Because the name of the game is to get assets over hours. You want more assets, less hours at work. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this helped. I will see you in the next video.